another feature in Western thought that appears to be central is the idea that we are free, that we have free will, and this seems to be the basis of well, some even claimed that this is what makes us distinctly human. And now we have good philosophical and empirical reasons for thinking that free will is an illusion. Do you see in Buddhist thought any tendency to reach the same conclusion?
No.
I'm asking because it seems like the idea that there is no self seems incompatible with the idea that we are free. We who, right?
The person. Grand priest can do things, right? In due course this afternoon, I'm going to go for a walk. I choose to do that. I've got other things to do. I could stay at home and carry on writing, but I want to go for a walk, and I will. That's freely chosen. Of course, these things are caused, it's caused by my desires and so on. So there are causes and effects, but I don't think it ever occurs to Buddhist philosophers that the causes and effects involved might challenge anything that you might want to call free will. Mm-hmm. And there's an interesting question of why that is. Now, the question of free will in Western philosophy is kind of interesting as well, because generally speaking, there's not a lot of discussion of it in Greek philosophy. It features a bit in medieval Christian philosophy, in topics concerning God's foreknowledge, but really in modern philosophy, it starts to appear around the turn of the scientific revolution. And I'm inclined to think that what's driving this is a kind of notion of causation which arises around the turn of the scientific revolution. Call it billiard balls banging against each other if you'd like to make it crass. But this very distinctive notion of causation, causal determinism features largely in the scientific revolution. And I think that's when Western philosophers really start to worry about the challenge to free will.
When reasons and causes fall apart, let's say.
Yeah, if you like. Yeah, and it's causes that are doing all the real work. Mm-hmm. Buddhist philosophy was never affected by the scientific revolution in the same way that Western philosophy was. Which is not to say there's anything antithetical to modern science in Buddhism. On the contrary, in many ways, it's quite compatible with Buddhism. And many Buddhist people, like the Dalai Lama, have said, if something in Buddhism is incompatible with modern science, then it's Buddhism that should go. So it's not that Buddhism's anti-scientific, but it just didn't have to contend with the sort of notion of causation which developed out of the scientific revolution. And in fact, it must be said that notion of causation has gone out the window big time in the 20th century anyway. So, what to make of free will, determinism and so on is a big issue in Western philosophy, and we're not going to solve it here. But there's no sense in which I think standard Buddhist philosophy has ever been found a challenge to free will.
I see. Another thing that is well entrenched in our natural thinking and in our practices, and especially moral practices, is the idea of responsibility and well, in general, I would say that much of our moral intuitions and practices are based on the idea that we have a self. Like, suppose that you think that someone must be punished because he did wrong, then it seems like it is the self that is blamable. The blame falls on the self, right? And what happens to responsibility in a
Okay, look, blame falls on persons, not selves. Okay, if I go and, you know, put my knee on someone's neck and kill them, to take a rather topical example, it's the person that's sent to prison for this, not his soul. Okay, we hold people responsible, and people do things, they cause things to happen, and people are responsible. You don't have to believe in yourself to hold that. You have to have a view about what persons are, what makes them the same person. Of course, it would be crazy for me to do something and for you to be punished because we're not the same person. But, you know, in 3 days, I'll be the same person as I am now, with a bit of luck. I'll be very different in some ways, but it'll be the same person, which makes that me in 3 days liable for responsibility for what a bit of me now does. So I don't think moral responsibility involves selves at all.
Mm-hmm. One last thing about this self. One conceptual job that this self is called to do in Western thought is to account for personal identity. And I mean, it's the simplest answer, right? If you ask me what makes of you the same as when you were born, well, I'm numerically the same entity, let's say. And now, if we divorce self and person, then this problem emerges again, because then the question is, what makes a person the same person? And here things appear to be muddier and more complicated, let's say, in a world without the self.
To a certain extent, yes. I mean, if you believe in the self, that provides you with a very simple explanation of identity of persons over time. That's right. But, you know, even in Western philosophy, there are many people who've rejected this kind of view. An obvious example is Locke. Locke says that what constitutes personal identity is continuity of mental states, particularly memory. It's some kind of causal process. I mean, you know, people worry about Locke's account because they don't think he's got the kind of continuity, the kind of causation involved, right? But it's a very natural thought that identity of a person over time is constituted by some kind of causal continuity. All right, that's essentially what Buddhists were going to say. People, as I said, are a work in process, but they're a work in process subject to certain kind of causal processes and chains. What makes me tomorrow is that thing then is appropriately causally related to the bits of me today and not you. So, you know, when I have dinner tonight, bits of what I eat will be part of my body tomorrow. That's a causal process. When I see things when I go for a walk, I'll remember them tomorrow with a bit of luck. That's another causal process. So it's these causal chains which you can use to define personal identity over time.